Ethiopia, we got information about Africa, about Bible, so forth and so on, but we have yet to have the cojones to now say we're going to actually embark on that journey.
Yes,
I mean, actually do it. Look at the Americans or the white boys and the Pilgrims and the English and the others when they came to America for religious freedom. They came here because they were looking to find a place that they could practice their religion, their way of life, without any interference. Isn't that what we are seeking too? Isn't that what we're seeking right now? But first we got to get there. First we have to encourage our people that this is the only spiritual and logical move to be made. You see, right now we have the Chinese are investing in Africa, trying to take and steal. We have the Indians, we have the Europeans, we got the Americans. We're going to actually embark on that journey.
Yes,
I mean, actually do it.
Civilizations who rose to their pinnacle claimed that their God was the superior God and the only God of the universe. But when that civilization fell, so did their God, and another God took their place, which meant that man was God, not the God that they gave to you to control you. And until we get rid of all the gods that they've given to us by the name of Jesus, by the name of Allah, by the name of Yahweh, these are not the names that we call God. And until we understand that when you give somebody a name to worship God as, that God is through his mindset. That's what he created as God. That is his concept of God. And that's the reason why Africans today don't have control of land and so forth, because they worship a God that does not belong to them. They worship a concept that was not given to them. And of course, yes, we do have peoples of color, black people, who have these names. But you have to remember what name preceded. What is the oldest name for God that ever came past the lips of African people? See, now, when you get to that point, now you're touching on the original gene and the original DNA and the original wiring that interfaced us with cosmos. Once we know the name that was uttered from God, like Unkulunkulu, from the Monomotappan Empire in the southern and deepest part of Africa, below the Sudan, when you start speaking the name of the gods that came from the lips of your true ancestors, then we will begin to empower ourselves and reconnect those DNA. But as soon as you start disrupting the frequencies with the names of gods that did not belong to you, you will never, ever reconnect that DNA with the cosmos. A lot of the people who introduced to my teachings, to Bobby's, to Dr. Delbert Blair's, to Sister Pukram's, they too are looking for a name for God, and they have gone back. Because I remember when coming up, when it was about us taking on what we saw as Muslim or Islamic names. Now they're going back to Kemet and assuming Kemetic names, which means that the consciousness is now going back to a point where we're beginning to examine ourselves before we were adulterated in our consciousness. And according to a good brother friend of mine, Horace Butler, we're going to find out that Kemet was also here in the West, and that all of the information around, so the Temple of the Sun, which we call Heliopolis, and was called Teotihuacan, which was the city of Tehuti, or Mexico, which was actually the city of Meshi, the African king that was here in the middle parts of the Mesoamerica. His name was Meshi or Mezi, and in Mexico, ko meaning land, it was the land of Meshi or Mexico. That Montezuma, being who he was, Cortez's secretary, finds out that he was from the Mali Empire. So you begin to study and understand that Abu Bakr II sent over 500 ships to the West, 200 of which never returned. 300 he sent 2 years later to find the 200 that didn't return. Only one ship came back. So the Africans that were here in the West were the same Khemites that were over there in the East. Mm-hmm. And the pyramids that they speak about, that Pythagoras was speaking about, and all the rest of these men, powerful chroniclers of Greek history, when they were traveling around the world, nobody is speaking about the fact that that Herodotus was mentioning that when he went to Egypt, and they kept this out of the of the archives, that he spoke about temples sitting on top of the pyramids. Now, nowhere here over in Africa do we see temples sitting on top of pyramids. The only place we see that is over here in the Americas. Mm-hmm. So what my brother Horace Butler has now brought to light is that we had a thriving civilization over here that matched Kemet over there in Africa, and that we had vigorous trading going back and forth, and even wars here on this land. There's even documented evidence of a queen of Chicago that waged war with members of ancient Kemet. So we have a lot of information to catch up on, and our young people, those children that I see coming up, are digging out for evidence. They're digging for evidence beyond what it is that the white man and the European and the Pope and the rest of them have tried to hide of the history of the Western Hemisphere. Notice all the digging is done in Africa or over in Europe and these areas. Nobody's doing any digging over here, or if they are, you don't hear anything about it, because then all the information, particularly what we see of the Olmec heads and so forth, is going to tell too much information about who was really here on this land before so-called Christopher or Christophe Colombo. And remember, when Kem was invaded and all of the true Kemites were forced out of the areas that we know to be Tameri and Ta-Nehisi, they went south and west. And when the slave trade happened, according to Dr. Smalls, who told me, when the slave trade happened, it was the strangers to those areas that were given up for the slave traders. So the people who are over here in the West are the descendants of ancient Kem. And that's why you see so much focusing and attention being given to ancient Kemet here in the West, because that's where they came. Okay? That's where the blood of ancient Kem is. Not only were we here already, but those who were forced over here during the Ma'angamisi, misnamed the Ma'afa, during the Ma'angamisi, during that time when they were bringing all these so-called captives or slaves over here, they were actually offloading the genetic lineage of ancient Kemet. And that's why there's such a fever for young peoples or the peoples over here and the resurrection of Kem over here, more so than anyone over there living in ancient, living there on the ancient land that is known as Kem.
I just want to explain, because we want to get things clear. Let me give you an example of what happened back in 1990. There was a show being broadcast in New York City. I think the woman's name was Kay Thomas or something. Black Conscious show on the radio. And she had several scholars, Leonard Jeffries and other these scholars and these particular, the conscious elite was in there, and all of them were saying, you know, we don't have schools no more that's conducive to us. We don't have businesses and goods and services. We don't have this and we don't have that. We don't train our children to do this. We don't train our children. And they just went on about an hour discussing the black problem. And somewhere at the crack of 12 o'clock, something spiritual happened. And somebody said, hey, maybe we aren't supposed to do those things. Maybe we're supposed to be doing something else. And once that question is asked, then there's a whole other world that open up to you. So a part of our shutting down was our metamorphosis stage. So what had happened was we started losing divine memory. And as a result, the Egyptians or the Kemites recorded, in a recording period of the monumental phase, they recorded all of this particular knowledge in all of these particular temples. Do you know that a part of the Greeks coming in and accessing some of that particular information was a part of the plan?
Wow.
And what I mean by that is this. You got to look at a bigger picture. They understood that we was going to deteriorate and we was going to go to sleep as a people. So they built these particular monuments, and they were there for thousands of years to calculate all this type of stuff, as well as going up into people, places like India, where a lot of the advanced information was also in India. So anyway, the fall came long before, because our time was running out. Our memory was going. And as a result, we had to record it, give it to the rest of the world. That's what the Moors came in. The Moors are nothing but an Egyptian, the last invasion of Egypt was by the Arabs. The Moors banded together under Islam and took this stuff up into Europe and set up the 16 universities to preserve this. Some people say, well, how did they were Islam? No. The Egyptian priests understood a religion. They could go into a religion like you go into a Democrat or Republican party. They could use it as a political system for conquest to take something to a people. So that's what they did with the whole Islamic thing. So when you look at this bigger picture, all this stuff here was the way it is supposed to be. They say you will be disturbed, but they say when this time comes and you disturbed, rejoice, because the kingdom is nigh. And this is coming from the Gnostic teachings, which was the stuff that the Old Testament and all that stuff was made out of. And this was put together by the Coptic Egyptians, or the Khemites, and the Coptic Egyptians, which means later-day Egyptians. And so those particular texts are the ones that later on the Romans drafted and made the New Testament out of. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, the Gnostic text. And so the Jesus in there is actually Horus, who never walked the planet. You see what I'm saying? It was talking about a person or a people in the future. You see, a people in the future. We are those particular people. So the definition of the Christ was not just one man in some sandals walking around in some sand. It would be a group of people days in a country that's not yet established yet. But there'll be a country in the West that people will take all types of transportation, and all different races will be in that country in the latter days. Because they got texts. They got the Hermetic text where they talk about us going into slavery. And they say, although you will be an Egyptian or an African, your mind will be of another race. That's in the Hermetic text. Hermetic text. And they said we will be in the West, because the word Osiris means the great Westerner. Right. In the Hermetic text, they say, will we ever get out of this slumber? They say yes. They say it will be a group of ancient Egyptians living in the latter days in the Western Hemisphere. And they would reestablish Maya. So whenever we claimed Kemet in the late 80s and the 90s, that was the coming back of those particular Egyptians rising up, or those Khemites. You see what I'm saying? And all other nations, Moors. We are everything. Somebody say, you Muslim, I say, yeah. You Hebrew, I say, yeah. They say, you Camite, I say, yeah, because I know that we are the authors of all of that. Everything you do, because the mere fact you are conscious, you are a part of the establishment. You are actually working towards, you see what I'm saying, establishing that kingdom. You see, so it's some beautiful stuff. 5,000-year-old prophecy. Right, talking about America.
Real powerful.
Talking about a people in America. An extension of the ancient Egyptians, or the ancient Khemites.
You know, it's good that we're studying these books. We need to continue to study these books. But there comes a point, everyone, where that knowledge can only take you so far. But then there is a time that we must have that other conversation. And this is the conversation that we're having now. This is the conversation that you all should be having. When you begin to think about things going on in your own life and how terrible they can be, this is the time that you look at the human level and you see the suffering of our people. I guess my question is to my brothers and sisters who think this way, because it's not all of you, who thinks that the white man or the powers that be still have control of you. Then what are you doing all of this studying and work for? What are you doing it for? You have to see things holistically. You have to go to the spiritual realm. It is just necessary in these times. We're moving in these times. Yes. Everyone has told us that. Sister Myra, Brother Bobby Hemmett, Phil Valentine. Gosh, I could go on and on with the names. Brother Panic. Everyone has tried to move us to that point, and we're trying to move ourselves to that point where we can become spiritual. This is the place that we all have got to get ourselves. If you want to make a difference, the difference is going to have to come in a different way. Yes. It is going to come for you connecting with that intuition, that spirituality that resides within both of us, male and female. All of this Kundalini practice that we've been doing, this energy that we want to rise, well, the energy is rising.
Yes.
Are you rising with it? Are you rising with that energy? Because that energy is going to take you to a place that your heart and the pain of this human life cannot supersede. You understand? Yes. It cannot take you there.